They called him Anton the Kind. At least, that's what the children whispered when he passed, cloaked in his long black coat, his gloved hands always carrying lilies, even in the dead of winter, in a town wrapped in fog and forgetting somewhere. Between Bavaria and a dream he walked as though following a ghost, only he could see. No wife, no family, no warmth, except for the waxed paper bundles he left each week at the graves of girls who died too young. His neighbors thought him strange, but harmless, a quiet man, retired from science, who read poems to the wind and spent more time with the dead than the living. But history remembers him by another name now. Anton Lenz, physician, anatomist, collector of bones, and the architect of one of the most unsettling love stories Europe has ever buried beneath its church floors. No one knows exactly when his obsession began. Some say it was in the cholera wards, when the girl with the amber hair died in his arms, her breath escaping like a prayer swallowed by silence. Others believe it began far earlier, when as a boy, he had followed the procession of his sister's funeral, watching her disappear into the wet earth, begging the priest to let him hold her just once more. But the church denied the dead their embrace. The earth swallowed them whole and unkind. Perhaps that is why Anton became a man who would not let go. In 1883, he was appointed chief of the anatomical theatre in Marienstadt, decaying university town where crows, outnumbered students, and the walls of the morgue were painted with mold. He was given access to boarders no one claimed, vagrants, prostitutes, children without names. He cleaned their bones, documented their deformities, and filed their hearts into jars. But even then, his records showed a strange tenderness. He gave them names, wrote them letters, buried the unclaimed ones with flowers no one paid for. It was a winter like no other that cracked his mind wide open. Frost bit deeper than memory. The river froze, and with it came the silence. No lectures, no light. Anton sat alone among the corpses in his cold office, candles flickering like dying eyes, reading Ovid aloud to the dead. Then she arrived. The official report described her as female, age 16 to 18, cause of death unknown. Her body had been found near the convent well, dressed in linen, soaked with snowmelt and silence. No family came forward, no record of her name, no inquiry. Just another forgotten blossom dropped by the scythe of time. But Anton saw something different. She was beautiful in the way moonlight is beautiful on empty streets. Her skin pale, not yet touched by decay. Her eyes, though closed, seemed to dream. Her lips were parted as though she had died and in the hollow of her collarbone, he thought he saw a question waiting to be answered. He did not bury her. He requested an extension of autopsy rights, citing academic interest in the preservation of youthful tissue. The board approved, assuming her to be another specimen for dissection or taxidermy, as was not uncommon in that grotesque century of medical curiosity. But Anton had never preserved a body this way before. Not for study, not for science. He embalmed her with care he had never given the living. He replaced the eyes with glass. He reconstructed her joints with wire and silk. He cleaned her fingernails and brushed her hair with the comb of his mother. And when she began to stiffen, he arranged her on a fainting couch beneath the window of his study, where the light could touch her gently at dawn. He called her Clara. Each morning, he greeted her with tea. Each night, he read to her until the candles bled down to nothing. He bought her gowns velvet navy, lace-trimmed, and dressed her with the reverence of a widower dressing a memory. Her silence was not cold to him. It was devotion. Months passed. The morgue records began to fall behind. He stopped attending lectures. Letters from the university piled up unanswered. Rumors spread like fever that he had lost his mind, that he spoke to someone no one else could see, that the light in his study never went out. And still, Clara remained, wrapped in silk, draped in time, her glass eyes catching the reflection of the man who believed love could transcend rot and reason. But in Marienstadt, rot does not sleep. And what Anton did not know, what no man in love ever wishes to see, was that Clara had begun to change. Her skin beneath the powder shifted. A strange warmth rose in her chest, not from life, but from something deeper, something older, something no longer content with stillness. The corpse had begun to whisper. The neighbors first heard it in the frostbitten hours before dawn, a soft hum, like wind in the pipes, but not wind, a melody, broken and simple, like a lullaby that forgot how it ended. When they leaned closer to the walls that faced the old Lenz manor, they heard Anton's voice answering, gently, as one might speak to a child or a ghost. No one dared to knock. In Marienstadt, where winters lasted too long and stories crept into your bones like mold, it was safer not to ask what a lonely man did behind locked shutters. Safer to pray, to look away, to forget. But Anton did not forget. He wrote in his journals daily now, pages flooded with declarations and longing, not for science, but for Clara. She listens, he scribbled, though she does not speak. There is intelligence behind her silence, a willingness to be known. At night, he placed his hand over her chest, waiting. Once, he claimed to feel a faint pulse beneath the waxed linen of her bodice. A flicker, he wrote, as if her soul returned briefly to acknowledge my devotion. Of course, it wasn't a soul. Not the kind priests bless or spirits bear. It was something much stranger, and it began to shape his dreams. He dreamed of Clara standing, moving not as a woman, but as a marionette, stiff, perfect, and utterly obedient. He saw her walking through halls lit with candle smoke, her joints clicking softly, her hair brushing against portraits of the dead. Sometimes she wept, not from sorrow, but because she knew something terrible was coming. One morning, he found her hand had shifted, only slightly, a centimeter at most. But Anton measured everything. He had recorded her posture with exacting precision. That hand had moved. He asked the housekeeper, Frau Weller, if anyone had entered his study. She swore upon the bones of her ancestors that no one dared. Not even she, who had cleaned his floors for 20 years, would cross the threshold. There's something wrong with her, she muttered, eyes narrowed. You shouldn't keep her here, Herr Lenza. That thing is not your daughter, not your wife, not anything holy. He dismissed her, of course, fired her that afternoon. Clara deserved peace, but peace was not what she gave. The next night, he found fresh mud by her feet. Just a trace, a smear of dark soil on the wooden floor. He wiped it up without thinking, then froze. Her shoes, they were damp. He checked the windows, locked. The door, still bolted. The fireplace, dead cold. Then how? The mind, he told himself, is fragile. It sees what it wants when reality breaks. He was tired, stressed. Clara had not moved, could not move. And yet the next day, her gown was torn, just slightly, at the hem, as though it had snagged on something sharp. Anton fell to his knees, trembling, and whispered her name, Clara, ... And for the first time, he thought he saw her lips part. There was no breath, no voice, only the suggestion of a word that had once been alive. That night, the rats in the walls went silent. Anton lit every candle in the house. He brought out books on necromancy, folklore, Hebrew mysticism, early Christian heresies, anything that hinted at the line between death and something else. He was not a fool. He had studied the nerves, the spine, the deep muscles of the human throat. This was not hallucination. It was presence, consciousness, a dormant soul waking, or ... something wearing a soul like a dress. For a brief time, Anton considered burning her, lifting her fragile body from the couch and placing her in the hearth, letting fire undo what his love had defied. But when he lifted her, her head lolled softly against his chest, and he felt, absurdly, her trust. It broke him. He could not destroy her, so instead, he built her a new body, no longer just linen and wax and fragile seams. He carved her arms from polished ashwood, reinforcing her joints with brass and silk cabling. Her spine, reconstructed with flexible ivory rings, moved with startling grace. He restructured her face with lacquered porcelain, painted each eyelash with a single hairbrush. She looked less human now, but more divine. An icon, a muse, a god in girl form. She no longer needed to speak. Every motion said enough, and at night, he danced with her. He played records, old waltzes from Vienna, and guided her around the study like a prince in mourning. Her weight surprised him. She moved, not like a doll, but like something remembering how to live. He swore her hands began to respond. Her head would tilt ever so slightly, as though reacting to his voice. By spring, Anton stopped opening his shutters. He boarded the windows and painted over the glass. Marienstadt saw less and less of the man they once called kind. The manor became an unlit mausoleum, and inside it, a man danced with death and called it love. But the villagers would not ignore it forever. One boy, curious and cruel, broke into the garden to see if the rumors were true. He never made it to the study. The dog found his body the next morning beneath the cypress tree, lips blue, eyes wide, as if something had whispered his name and then erased it from inside his skull. Anton didn't speak at the inquest. Only Clara did, though no one could hear her but him. They summoned Anton to court in the dead of June, when the stench of rot from the swamplands crept into Marienstadt like a secret. Everyone refused to speak aloud. He arrived, not as a man accused, but as a figure from a Gothic film, impeccably dressed in a black velvet frock coat, his gloves white, his cane crowned with an ivory skull. He bowed to the judge with the solemnity of a bishop and sat without blinking as they read the charges: unlawful possession of human remains, desecration of the dead, and though no one dared say it aloud, madness blooming into danger. They did not speak of Clara directly, not at first. No one wanted to acknowledge that the rumors might be true, that a man had fallen in love with a corpse, and worse, that the corpse had begun to love him back. When they asked about the boy, one found in his garden, Anton's voice was firm, almost gentle. He trespassed, he said, eyes distant. She does not like to be seen by strangers. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. You refer to her as though she's alive. Anton's smile was so soft, it seemed carved from grief. Does it trouble you, Your Honor, to imagine that death may not be the end? They searched the house? Of course they did. The townspeople demanded it. They expected to find a skeleton in a bridal gown, perhaps, or some decomposing effigy tucked behind curtains. But what they found instead was something far worse. She stood in the study, eyes closed, hands folded, lit by a single beam of light that escaped through a crack in the boarded window. She wore white lace, hand-stitched, with pearls sewn into the cuffs. Her porcelain face glowed like altar marble. Her spine visible through the sheer fabric moved, as though adjusting to their presence. One inspector dropped his lantern. Another began to pray. It was not death that terrified them. It was beauty. Anton spoke as they stared. She is not a corpse. She is memory. She is what God abandoned when he grew bored of creating. And then, with trembling pride, he added, she breathes when I dream. They took her, of course, wrapped her in canvas, and locked her in a university vault, declared her evidence. Anton screamed, once then, fell silent, not in rage, but in heartbreak. He stood motionless as they led him away, whispering only, she'll be lonely. Please, don't leave her in the dark. In the months that followed, Marienstadt tried to forget again. The court found him unfit for trial, remanding him to a sanatorium perched above the lake where birds went to vanish. Professors studied Clara in secret, arguing whether she was art, delusion, or blasphemy. Her construction baffled them. The internal mechanisms too delicate, too advanced. The silk ligaments behaved like living sinew. Her skin, though clearly artificial, did not decay, did not stain, did not tear. One night, a student broke the vault's lock and tried to bring her home. He was found the next day with glass shards in his tongue and both eyes missing. No one could explain how. Rumors began again. Clara had been created with a soul, not borrowed, not stitched, not stolen, but conjured. A soul summoned not from heaven nor hell, but from a place where memory and longing decay into something else, something hungry. And in the sanatorium, Anton waited. He grew thinner, quieter. Nurses often found him speaking to the air, as though expecting her reply. She forgives you, he told one, unprompted, even though you left her in the cold. At night, he carved shapes into the walls, dolls, roses, birds with broken wings. In his cell, he built small replicas of her hands, her eyes, her smile. His cell became a shrine. Then came the blackout. One winter night, the sanatorium lost power. Just 3 hours. But when the lights returned, Anton was gone. No signs of struggle, no forced locks, only a line of footprints in the snow barefoot, inhumanly small, leading away from the building into the forest. The townspeople searched for days. Some believed he drowned himself in the lake. Others whispered that Clara had come to retrieve him, that she walked through fire and frost, and locked doors to bring him home. Months passed, years. Clara was moved to a museum, placed behind glass, labeled as the Marienstadt doll. No plaque mentioned Anton. No curator spoke of whispers or movement. Children passed her case and shivered without knowing why. But at night, the guards sometimes heard footsteps, and in the reflection of the glass, they swore she smiled, because Clara remembered. And Anton, wherever he had gone, was surely waiting. The Marienstadt doll was sealed behind tempered glass, the kind used in bank vaults and prisons, with silent alarms hidden beneath her pedestal. Tourists came. They gawked. They whispered. They took photos, though none of the photographs ever came out quite right. Her face would blur. Her eyes refused to focus. Some images developed with streaks of red across the frame, like old wounds reopened. The museum director once joked that she's camera shy, until one night he stayed behind 2 catalog new acquisitions. His body was found the next morning, no wounds, no signs of a break-in, just his face frozen in a scream and a single white rose resting on his chest. From that day on, Clara was never left alone again. Guards patrolled every hour, but still, things moved in her case. Slight shifts, her fingers changed position, dust never settled on her skin. No one could explain how she remained so intact. Her creators, if they ever existed, were never found. Her materials defied carbon dating. Her joints moved with fluid resistance, like human muscle. Some believed Anton had been a genius lost to madness. Others claimed he'd made a pact, trading his soul for her eternal beauty. But the truth, as always, was more complicated, because Anton had made a pact, but not with devils or spirits. He'd made it with memory. He'd realized something no one else dared to admit, that love, unfulfilled, festers. That longing can become a force, not romantic, not pure, but ravenous. Clara was not a woman. She was what remained after Anton's grief fermented into obsession. She was not created. She was summoned. She was built from the agony of things that refused to die. A professor at the university, young brash, unafraid, decided to publish a paper exposing the myth. He conducted tests. He drilled into her arm, measured her artificial bones. On the night before his article was to be submitted, he vanished from his study. All that remained was a sketch of her face, drawn with such aching tenderness it looked like a farewell. People began visiting the museum not out of curiosity, but devotion. They left flowers, lace ribbons, broken mirrors. Some whispered confessions through the glass. One woman slit her palm and pressed it to the barrier. Another left her wedding ring, saying Clara would understand. The curators tried to stop it. They failed. Something about the doll called to the broken-hearted. They tried to move her. That was their final mistake. The truck never made it out of town. It was found overturned in a ravine. The driver's eyes boiled in his skull. His hands fused to the steering wheel. Clara was untouched, seated upright in the crate, smiling, and beneath her, a scrap of torn velvet black, with a trace of perfume, unmistakably Anton's coat lining. But Anton had been gone for 5 years, officially dead, unofficially, missing. After that, she was left alone. The exhibit closed, the room bricked up. They swore it was for public safety, but the truth was simpler. They were afraid. No one walked that corridor anymore. The museum began to rot from within, mildew growing like veins across the ceiling. Some said the building was cursed. Others said Clara was still waiting. One winter, an old man with white hair and a limp appeared at the gates. He claimed to be Anton's brother. He asked for 1 hour alone with the doll. He entered. He never came out. When they opened the door, they found only a black coat, folded neatly on the floor, and Clara, with both eyes finally open. They say love conquers all, but they forget that love, when left alone too long, becomes something else, something neither dead nor living. She waits, now not for Anton, not for justice, but for someone else to remember her, because memory is the truest resurrection, and those who forget her story, the true story, will learn that she was not the only one ever made. She was the first of the memory-bound, the first of the sorrow dolls. And somewhere in the dark, where the past still weeps and velvet curtains never fall, Clara walks, not because she wants to, but because the living never let her sleep.